Hello, YouTube collective. Today, I want to share my thoughts on this partial lunar eclipse in the sign of Pisces. So, yes, you heard it, friends. We are having a partial lunar eclipse in the sign of Pisces. And do I have a date? Yes, it is going to be on August 27th. Not exactly sure the time for totality and all of that. You'll just have to check your local area, but it's sort of wrapping up the total lunar eclipse we just had in the sign of Leo, which was at, I think it was around the 12th of August. I made a video about that eclipse as well. And so now we're having our lunar eclipse, and then after about a week or so, we will completely wrap up the eclipse portal, which I know for some has probably been a very wild time, probably for most. You know, eclipse energy and time frames in the collective can be a wild ride. It can be a interesting, wild card, I guess I should say. So welcome back. I'm here today to talk to you about the total lunar eclipse and just my thoughts around this eclipse. I have notes posted in other areas, so if I'm not looking directly at the camera, just know that I'm reading something somewhere. But I wanted to try to tell you a little bit about this eclipse. So the eclipse will be at 4 degrees of Pisces. And of course, it is the lunar eclipse. It's a partial lunar eclipse. And it's kind of like the full moon phase, if you will. It's going to be in the sign of Pisces, and it is going to be opposing the sun at 4 degrees of Virgo. And during this eclipse, the sun will be conjunct Mercury, exalted Mercury at I think about 4 or 5 degrees of Virgo, as well as we will have a separate transit that we'll talk about as I continue explaining just my thoughts and ideas about this eclipse. So what is a lunar eclipse? Let's start there, right? I don't know a lot about these, astronomical phenomena that happen. So I love to go back and get a little bit of information and look them up and try to find out whatever I can about, what is going on when we're having these supernatural things that's just, going on in our world, in our atmosphere, right? So what is a lunar eclipse? Well, it is when the Earth is directly between the sun and the moon. So that's Google's version. So don't kill the messenger. I don't know if I'm exactly accurate. If you're heavy into astronomy and you're watching my videos, I don't know a lot about astronomy, but this is sort of like what I could find on the internet. The Earth will cast a shadow on the moon's face, blocking direct sunlight and dimming the lunar surface. But since this is considered a partial eclipse, only a part of the moon will enter the Earth's umbra or shadow. So it's kind of like, when I looked at the pictures of it, it was like this little bite out of the moon or something like that. Like if it was a full illuminated moon, I guess, phase, then it looks like there's this little bite out of the moon because it is an eclipse, right? So, so what do I have to say or talk, or what am I thinking about this eclipse? Well, friends, I think this lunar eclipse is going to be a big deal. I don't know if you've been watching any more videos. You probably have if you watch moon videos and eclipse videos and astrology videos, right? We're all looking and trying to figure out what's coming, what's next, right? I have just been personally, since I study astrology and practice astrology, just been kind of doing my own research and learning a whole lot about this period of time we're going through, and sort of past periods of time around this energy. So buckle in with me for a bit as I tell you why I think this lunar eclipse is such a big deal. So first of all, one of the things I researched and I found, the next full eclipse in the sign of Pisces will not happen for quite some time. I think it was like over 3 decades. So I think there's going to be like next year in 2027, there's going to be what is considered to be a penumbral, I think is how you say it, eclipse, which a lot of astronomers or people who study astronomy see it more as like a full moon. It just, there's a part of it that doesn't really, I guess the full shadowing or whatever part doesn't, the moon doesn't fully move into the umbra or the shadow of the earth. And so it is considered then like a penumbral eclipse. And I know we're going to have one of those in 2027, and that's going to be sort of like the last on that Pisces Virgo axis that we've been having these eclipses. And then, of course, we've already shifted into the new nodal axes, which is the Aquarius and Leo axes. But in terms of the Pisces side, there won't be another eclipse in Pisces for over another decade, or over quite some time, like 3 decades from now, which I thought was so cool. I think in 2045 I saw where there was going to be an eclipse in Pisces, but again, it's sort of like this penumbral eclipse in Virgo, and it will sort of only be, I don't know if it's going to be a penumbral one or if it will sort of almost be like an eclipse, but not, something, it's where it's not a full, where it says, actual eclipse when I was doing the research. So that's one of the reasons why I think this eclipse is probably a big deal, and probably one of those times right now in the energy that we're moving through that we really need to pay attention to our lives and what's going on in our lives, what's going on in the collective, what's going on in our world, our humanity, because I think there is some crucial wisdom. There are some truths and light that's really being illuminated and highlighted around this time. There's a lot to be gained, I think, around this time as well. And I'm sort of looking at this time as the eclipse that shifted humanity. Now, don't quote me on that one. I don't know if anybody else is out there saying that, but for me, I am. I think this is a very potent energy and time that we are really moving through and traveling through right now in the collective, in our personal life, in our individual, or not individual life, but just in a community life, with the communities, with organizations, institutions, what have you. In our world, I just think we're moving through things that, I haven't seen play out for quite some time, if ever. So, I look at it as, we are finally here, we've made it. I think, right now, humanity is being summoned to release unconscious fears, conditioning. Humanity is learning how to navigate life with a real purpose, with a real dignity, a real truth, and a real hope. The last set of eclipses that we had in the Virgo or the Pisces Virgo axes was in 2006, 2007, and 2008. So if you can cast your mind back there, or if you're watching these videos and you're like, honey, I wasn't even born then. But if you were, I think you can remember a little bit of what life was like in '06, '07, and '08. Um, the, of course, the nodes of fate and destiny. The North Node was in Pisces, the South Node was in Virgo, kind of like what we've just went through in 2025. Well, there was one, I think, well, yeah, they didn't officially move until 2025, but 2025 and 2026 wrapping up. But it's definitely, I think, from having that in '06 to '08 and then now coming back in and sort of having it all wrap up with these eclipses, you know, I think it's really helped us to shift. I feel like we've been sort of going through shifting and changing as a world, as a humanity, as an individual, depending on where you have, these energies playing out for you for quite some time, but even with the Pisces, I think even if it is on an individual level, Pisces is, it's kind of that energy where it's very much so connected to the humanity. In modern astrology, they look at the Pisces energy as, let's see if I can explain it. It's more of like, there's a little bit of every sign in Pisces. Pisces is the final sign in the zodiac. And excuse me, by the time we get to the sign of Pisces, it's gone around the complete zodiac, right? And so it's very much so connected to humanity. It's very much so connected to the world and the other. And so I think there's a lot that we have been shifting as a world. And so that's another reason why I think this Pisces lunar eclipse is sort of like, a big deal, considering there won't really be another one for another 3 decades, where the nodes of fate and destiny are in that Pisces North Node and Virgo South Node axes. So what are some other things, I think, friends, that have helped us to shift? Well, as I mentioned earlier, I've been doing some research and looking back, and I love to go back. I love to study. I'm a huge history buff. I love learning about what was going on when and how, and what was all working, the pieces and the parts, right? So one thing I noticed when I looked back in terms of like the energy that has really been helping humanity to shift and to make these changes, these big changes that we are now able to witness, I think, in our humanity, in our world, in our own lives individually, is there have been some major shifts with the outer planets, right? So back in, let's see here, 2006, yes, I believe, when we had the last nodal axes of Pisces and Virgo, and we were having these eclipses, we had Uranus, right? The planet of change and community and, just all of that, right? Uranus is a major outer planet, and it was actually in Pisces at the time, And so to have the planet of revolution and all of that there at that time was significant as we were going through this shift into this, Pisces, Virgo, Pisces North Node, Virgo South Node, moving kind of like from, the self to like the other and the humanity of people. We had the planet of change there, from 2006. It had been there earlier before that. I'm not exactly sure when Uranus moved into Pisces, but I suppose possibly or maybe a little bit less than that, years prior. But Uranus was already there, and in 2006, and it stayed in Pisces until 2011. So, and then after Uranus went out of Pisces, we had Neptune, okay, the planet of, oh gosh, what is Neptune responsible for? Neptune is responsible for, I think, a planet that is mystical, a planet that is mysterious, right? These outer planets, like I said, you can't really see them with the naked eye, and in modern astrology, they've really done a great job at trying to, I think, study them and to bring them into focus as some of the archetypes or significations that they have. You know, Neptune being one of those planets, I think, where they have tied more to, you know, even more so of a humanity energy, you know, sort of like a higher octave, if you will, of Venus, you know, of unity and spirituality, you know, the mystical. So Neptune was there. It entered into Pisces in 2012, and it stayed into Pisces until 2025. And even some this year, Neptune was finishing up in Pisces. So we had Saturn after that move into Pisces, right? From 2023 until 2025, and then still some this year in 2026. We had from retrogrades, of course, even with Neptune, we had a little bit of Saturn finishing up its run in Pisces in 2026 and Neptune in 2026 from the retrograde periods. So now Neptune and Saturn are fully in Aries, and they won't be coming back into Pisces. But I just thought that was such a huge thing to think about. Like, you know, when we talk about shifting, when we talk about change, when we talk about fate, and when we talk about destiny, you know, as you've probably heard me mention if you watch my channel and listen to my videos, I think, you know, the universe is right on par with helping us, the divine intelligence, make the shifts, make the changes that is going to be necessary to move us into things. You know, it's not as if things are happening to us. It's the energy has already been there. It's already been present for us, you know. And now we, if anything, are just moving along with it. We are stepping into it. We are aligning with where we already are. So I wanted to share that. And then last, but certainly not least, you know, we are finishing up, or have finished up, with the nodes moving back into the Pisces North Node and Virgo South Node. Just, you know, this year we finished up with that, as we had them go through Virgo South Node and Pisces North Node starting in 2025 all year. And then partial here for 2026. I think it was like around July, I want to say the end of July, when we had it shift into Aquarius and Leo. So, you know, we have had a lot of work in this fate and this destiny side of our life in terms of shifting and changing. And, you know, I think, you know, needless to say, right, our destinies have been transformed, shifted, and they're just, you know, we are at the place we are supposed to be at right now. And so as we're going through, I think, this lunar eclipse in Pisces, you know, this last lunar eclipse in Pisces for another long time, I think one thing we can think about and look at is what is already present, you know, what has already presented itself, how we have shifted, how we have changed, because I think that that's so important when you consider and you look at lunations. You know, it's just that time of reflection, that time of where am I, and, you know, how did I get here, right? What's really going on in my life and how I see that. So, knowing what area, okay, which I will probably always say, of your natal chart, if you follow along for the astrology purpose of this, what area of your natal chart this is playing out in for you really helps you to see how it has affected you, how this partial lunar eclipse in Pisces is going to affect you or have already affected you. Or even maybe be, somewhat of like confirmation, of things that have already shown up and the milestone that already has been reached, or the culmination of this time for you, right? So knowing where that is definitely is useful, friends. It helps you to see it helps you to see and feel affirmed, as I mentioned. And, give you sort of like a sense of confirmation of this time and realizing what has played out. One thing I wanted to mention, because, friends, there's no doubt there is a new you. Okay. There is a new me. There is a new collective. There's a new humanity. There's just a new world than, it was a few decades ago. And so I think it's kind of cool to really see that. I think to really grapple with that, and if you are having some moments during, I know, full moons or lunar eclipse full moons, I consider that to be like a full moon on steroids. And in the sign of Pisces, a very, very deep water energy, emotionally felt sensitive time. I think if you are out there and you're just like, wow, well, what the heck is going on? This seems pretty big. It seems pretty intense, and that is rightly felt. That is sort of the times we're in, and is definitely the times we are being ushered into, and that we are navigating through this portal. So back around, I wanted to bring up this time frame because back around February 9th of this year, remember we were entering in the first portal of eclipses that we had earlier this year. And around February 9th, we entered into the, before that, I think it was like a little bit after that full moon in Leo, and we were gearing up for a new moon. What was it? Yeah, annular solar eclipse, I believe it was, in the sign of Aquarius. And we had some moment in that portal time. And the nodes of fate and destiny were actually still on that Pisces axis and that Virgo axis. We had Mercury, the planet of Mercury, was in Pisces, and it was sort of starting to slow down because Mercury was going to go retrograde in the sign of Pisces. I think it was probably right, I want to say before, was it before or after? I think it was after that annular, solar eclipse in the sign of Aquarius. We had Mercury in Pisces go retrograde. And it was right around the same degree that this Pisces lunar eclipse full moon that we're about to experience is going to be at. So I wanted to mention that there was a slowing down. And then a little bit after that, maybe like a week later, Mercury went retrograde in Pisces. There was a total lunar eclipse in the sign of Virgo. And then, we had Mercury retrograde for a while. And then we wrapped up that eclipse portal. And then we went into sort of the gearing up for the new moon in Pisces. So, and then around that time, Mercury, which had been retrograde in the sign of Pisces, went direct, and it exactly conjuncted the North Node in Pisces at that time, which I thought was wild, you know. So if you want to think back to what was going on for you around that time, I know, you know, we look at lunar phases and we look at seeding periods and points, and some things kind of point us back from, you know, times months ago that we're like, oh, wow, this is finally wrapping up, or something was seeding probably around that Pisces new moon phase that was happening. I think it was around March 18th of 2026. And then about 2 days later, or maybe a day later, I don't even know if it got up to like 2 days later, we had Mercury go direct from being retrograde in Pisces, and it conjuncted the North Node in Pisces, the nodes of fate and destiny. And you know, there was like this moment of, this is where we are headed. This is where we are going. You know, this is what is going to be uncovered. It was a new moon in Pisces, so there was a seeding point there, right? There was a mystery around it. And so, and now we're at this full moon in Pisces, where maybe we are able to make out some of the things that possibly were seeding in that period of time. So you have to kind of cast yourself back, you know, to kind of see what was going on for me and where am I at today. So let's see what else I have here, friends. Yeah, I think that time could definitely be highlighting something important, as all of this time that we've been going through and shifting, right? Maybe there was something around that time that was unclear, as it was a new moon phase, fuzzy even for you. You know, it is Pisces, it's a water energy. It's designed really to be felt through emotion. And, you know, it has that Virgo axis, which is more of the grounded, stabilizing, tangible energy. So yeah, so maybe you can think back to that time. Maybe there was something, you know, in this Pisces energy around that time that you were hoping to understand, you know, you were hoping to grasp. I think, you know, with this upcoming lunar eclipse in Pisces, opposing, right, this Virgo sun and this exalted Virgo Mercury, back then Mercury in Pisces is actually considered in its fall. So, you know, now, you know, we're here at this full moon lunar eclipse in Pisces, you know, opposing this exalted Mercury and this exalted sun, you know, conjuncting this critical degree North Node in Aquarius. Maybe there has been a milestone. I think there has probably been a milestone for many of us, right? There has been this energy, you know, that has been waiting for us and needing something to be built on, you know, needing a foundation, you know, something that to maybe find grounding, you know, though it's been difficult, maybe, you know, I definitely think it's come with difficulty with this energy that we're working with. I think that, you know, it's needed this grounding, and now here we are. We're at this lunar eclipse phase. It's opposing the sun and Mercury in Virgo. And, you know, it's a very real moment, you know, it's a very real moment of whatever was going on back then, you know, or whatever was seeding, you know, now I can clearly, distinctively see what that was, right? So I came up and was looking at as well, friends, some interesting transits, I think, that helps us to kind of understand the energy around this time that I wanted to highlight and talk about a little. Just some transits that I think are pretty interesting right now, right? We had, I think it was yesterday from the day that I'm making this video, we had Venus opposing, yes, we have Venus opposing Saturn, which happened on the 21st. Okay. So, there's this energy of relationships, right, in our life. Venus is a signification of our spouses, our relationships, our blessings, our children, harmony, things like that in our life. And it's in opposition with Saturn, around this time that this lunar eclipse is building, and again, a lunar eclipse is a full moon phase. So that's why I think it's so interesting to know that we are grappling with and sort of maybe wrestling with this energy of this tug of war, if you will, of this or that, or, maybe even indifferences. So anyhow, we have the sun is going to enter Virgo, which is going to happen on the 22nd. We have Mercury that's going to enter Virgo. It's going to happen on the 25th. So before this, Mercury and the sun got into Virgo, we had this Venus in opposition with Saturn. Okay. So, and then we had this, we're going to have the sun and Mercury make what is called a cazimi. The moment or the day of this partial lunar eclipse in the sign of Pisces. So the day of the eclipse, we're having this cazimi moment between the sun and Mercury. And so there's a major correlation, I think, that is unfolding for us, that we're able to kind of see very clearly now. I think in terms of relationships, in terms of the foundation of relationships, the foundation of, our families, our children, our, things of like the very personal things, guys. I think when we're dealing with a full moon lunar eclipse, this is dealing more with us, because these are our emotions. The moon is like our subconscious self. It's our subconscious reality. It's where we go to sort of find a grounding, right? To find stability. The sun is more of our conscious self. The moon is our subconscious self. And, it's where we go to find the comfort. It's where we go to sort of get the nurture or the nourishment that we need, And so this is a very personal time, a very personal lunation that is unfolding, and the energy is calling us to look at these very real transits that's happening around it. And I don't think it's out of coincidence, guys. I really think it is divine intelligence that is bringing us to the times that we are in right now. So, the day after this eclipse, we are going to have Mercury, going into a square or getting into a square. So another tense moment with Uranus, the planet of change. So, and that's going to happen the day after this eclipse. So I couldn't help but think, right, about how important it is right now to be able to actively sift through our emotions, versus our head. right? Versus our mental stimulation. This is a time where with a lunar eclipse in Pisces, this is a time, guys, where we need to feel all the feels. Pisces is the deepest of the water signs, right? We have 3 water signs. We have Cancer, which is sort of the first start of the water signs. And I look at that water as more of like a moving water, kind of like think of like a waterfall, right? It's, that first beginning of water flowing, right? And then we have Scorpio, which is more of like a solid or like a fixed water, which some people tie to like, oh, well, maybe it's ice. But I actually see the Scorpio water as a water sign. It's very much so a feeling sign. Or feeling energy, but that Scorpio is more of like the swamp. It's solid. It holds everything in it. It holds all the memories, everything, and that's why sometimes Scorpios get the bad rap for, can't you just move on? Like, stop thinking about that, but Scorpio is that water energy that will hold it. It's a solid water sign. And then we have Pisces, which is the finale of the water signs. And it's like that ocean. It's very, very deep. It's a deep water. If you think of an ocean, how many people can actually get to the bottom of an ocean, right? It is super deep, and the waters of the ocean run deep, right? So symbolically, as we move through this time, as we move through this Pisces lunar eclipse, I think this is a time to allow ourselves to reflect, to allow ourselves to sift through some of the deepest of the emotions. And I don't think it's going to be an easy time, as it is opposing, as I mentioned, this Sun and Mercury in Virgo. I think it's going to be a possibly a hard time. Possibly a time where, with an opposition, it can almost feel like this hostility, it can almost feel like this energy of the one thing that I need to be connected to or in unison with, I'm indifferent from. I don't connect with it, or I don't truly see it or agree, right, with it. So I really want you to think about this time as a time where, allowing yourself to feel all the feels, and to know that you may see this coming from others, as we are going through some of the deepest of the waters that we could ever possibly experience with regards to the energy right now. Okay. So perhaps there is some unrest, right, around the mind, okay, the soul, and the heart, right? There's this tug of war between these areas in our life or in humanity. This eclipse will usher, I think, some clarity, that we have to move forward, right? Change is upon us. As I mentioned, this is the last eclipse, lunar eclipse in Pisces for a very long time. And, we're sort of like, it's almost this sense of like, this is it. Like, I have to let it go, and I have to go this way, excuse me. I can't hold on to this past anymore. I can't continue on a route that is no longer there, perhaps, where the road has been, shut off, or, there's a detour around it or something. I say this because Uranus is actually squaring this eclipse, right? Uranus, the planet of change, the planet of revolution, friends, the planet of the community. So allowing yourself to see that, wow, we are in a time of change is actually very helpful and very healthy to help you navigate some of these deep waters, right? It's not just going to be a time, I thought about, where we can just sort of edit, we can just sort of, okay, let's sort of have a better editing system here to try to keep what we have and just edit around it and make it better to where it's still the same. It's just edited out parts and pieces that, no longer work or no longer fit, but I think real change and real action, without, the editing is going to be what's necessary. Perhaps something brand new, a whole new system, right? A whole new releasing and letting go of something. I think without it, things can become relentless for our lives, for our humanity, for our collective, for our world. So the way forward, progression is towards the new you, the new me, the new collective, finding out how do I connect with the new, right, is going to be major. A new humanity right now, friends, what I'm trying to say is dependent on change, and change happens, it starts from the individual to the families, right, to the groups, to the collective, to the world. So I think that's important for us to understand and to move as we are shifted through all of these different energies and transits that's, playing out as well. We can't just edit out the old ways anymore, the old ways of the past. Sometimes, I thought of this Pisces lunar eclipse. It has to be just completely washed out, washed away, like completely cleaned, not wiped, but washed, away, eclipsed, right, for a new foundation, even. The pull, or maybe perhaps the tug of war around these energies of the eclipse, I don't think this is something that we just automatically feel. I think that it's already been shifting us, as I mentioned in, earlier in the video. It's already been changing us. It's already been evolving us. It's already been helping us to see that the new is the only way forward. And we can't go back. Like, there's no other way around the other world or the old ways, because it's been shut off, it's been closed, in order for this new humanity to take its position. So what's being illuminated, right? I think the ideal versus the real, right? Mars just a week ago was in a square with Neptune. I made a video about that, and if you care, you can go back and watch it. But I think it was last week where Mars was in this square with Neptune. And I think, or maybe was it a square, or it was a square. And so eventually Mars is going to oppose Neptune, right? Well, I think there's a sense of like this energy around the ideal versus the real. And we can see this even with this lunar eclipse and this tug of war between this Pisces moon and this Virgo and, the sun and Mercury in Virgo, the ideal versus the real. There's a sense of like, there's a lot of energy around, well, who are we really? Who are you really? One of the cool things I love about astrology is that our subconscious self really dictates a lot of our conscious self, our subconscious conditioning, and energies around that, energies around the family, kind of dictates a lot of our identities, who we become, who we show up as, right? And so, but then, as life goes on, the real you comes forth, right? The real whatever has been shaped or conditioned does eventually take its transformation and its change into what is really there. So, the ideal you, the ideal me, the ideal humanity, right? The ideal world. These are things that are seeding and shifting at this point in time. So what are some ways we can align with this real conscious self? Okay. This real conscious world, this real conscious humanity. Well, I got a few things I can leave with you guys. We can address and release the old fears and feelings, right, that have perhaps influenced and shaped sort of our old subconscious, our old reality, of how we show up, our old conscious self, maybe even kept us repressed or stagnant even a little. Because again, it's calling for us to show up as ourselves, to transform, to sort of eclipse and even release, that ideal self for the real self, and that's deep. That's going to take a Pisces lunar eclipse, I think, to get us there. Sometimes when working with the Pisces and the Virgo axes, there are things that come up, there's issues around addiction. There's issues around, escapism or self-sacrifice, right? Blocks to growth and true affirmation. There's some things that happen around that can sabotage us or block those for us. And so in order to align with where we need to go, we have to address these things in our life. I think this lunar eclipse is highlighting, right, our innermost subconscious self, our innermost subconscious conditioning. And it goes deep, as I mentioned, it's in Pisces. So it's going to reach its target. That's the deepest we can go, guys. It's almost as if we can feel like, this powerful wrapping up, this eclipse, like where, okay, I'm done with that. I'm ready for the new. I'm ready for the next. Pisces is indeed the last of the signs in the zodiac, and so this wrapping up, this letting go, this saying goodbye, this is who the real is versus the ideal, is all common themes around this time, and that wrapping up can be in many forms. Unfortunately, it can be transforming to a new life. It can include death. It can include, just I'm done, being that ideal. Okay. So I wanted to throw that in there. And, it's, again, it's a deep emotional fabric when we're working with the Pisces, energy. So where is this energy illuminating for you, friends? On this Pisces Virgo axis, right? Is it your sun? Is it your conscious self, the father maybe, or superior figures in your life? Is it the moon, right? Your subconscious, your mother, your home, your conditioning, upbringing, your genealogy and your past and mystical energies? Or is it your Mercury, right? Your thoughts, your mind, your family, extended family, that is, your Venus, is this bringing up and illuminating for you relationships and fortune and your blessings? Or your Mars, is this bringing out for you this sense of, as I mentioned, a cutting off, a letting go, a death, action, it's like, I'm done with the war, so to speak. Or is it your Jupiter? Is it your beliefs, your stability, maybe your values? What about Saturn? Could this be happening for you around the Saturn areas of your life, your responsibilities, restrictions, your boundaries? Or maybe it's your ascendant, and it takes on more of a more personal shade. It's actually you that is being and letting go and being eclipsed and going into this new direction that you are now upon. Maybe it's multiple, right? Pisces and Virgo energies that you have being illuminated at this time. And it's extra, for you. And you really can see it and feel it on many different areas of life right now. Either way, I want to encourage you as I wrap up, right? If you're out there and you're listening, okay, make room for authentic healing, okay? Make room for healthy sacrifices. Make room for institutions, communities, and groups that are aligning with meaningful human support and compassion that is in a balanced and healthy way. Make room for those types of things, because I think that's exactly what we need. That's exactly where we're headed and what has to happen for this new change. What has to be eclipsed, right? Religious traditions, spiritual beliefs, teachings that support your truth. I think there's a lot we're seeing around that now of, just about religions and things, that haven't really been aligning in a humane way, in a way that is beneficial or have been beneficial for humanity, but have sought to have more of a, I guess you can say, more so of a way that benefits whatever interest that helps the person that is prominent or what have you. So there's a lot that has to be addressed and will be addressed with that will be eclipsed, I think. Sort of like this dying of power in that power dynamic. So maybe, friends, and I'll leave you with this, perfection was the imperfection. Could that be true? Could perfection really be what is imperfect about anything? Humanity, relationships, love, health. It really needs to be released in order to embrace the true and the real human experience of life. So, friends, last but not least, I leave you with a question. What really fosters unity and harmony? Is it a better, perfect foundation? Or is it a kinder, more balanced foundation? So I'm going to wrap up there. I know this video has been long, but as you can tell, I am very passionate about the Pisces archetype. I'm very passionate about this lunar eclipse and wrapping up this ending of this energy, there's been so many changes in my own individual life as I have sat back and watched the collective world and what's going on in the collective world, and changes in my own family. And there's a lot, right, that has been sown and that is still sowing underneath all of it. But I definitely wanted to just encourage the collective that if we are going through these times and we're shifting through these energies, just know that you are felt, and just know that it is normal. It is natural to be in the times that we are moving and navigating through right now. And I give you a warm Pisces lunar eclipse moon hug, and shed some emotions with you as well, as we all get through it, as we all get to the other side. And we will be able to look back and say, wow, we shifted, we changed, we made it. And we have now a new beginning of a humanity that is going to be different from the old, as each and every person participates and makes these changes. So I leave you with that, and I leave you with light and love, and I will be back on here for another video next week. I'm not sure what it's going to be on yet, but I think it's probably going to be something about Mars, so prepare. And I will talk to you later, and take care.